يوفي نعمه ويكافئ مزيده وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما يا كريم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. رب زدني علما رب زدني علما رب زدني علما. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا. Welcome everyone to another class on التبيان في آداب حملة القرآن. And today we're moving on to the second chapter, and this particular chapter is related to preferring the qari, preferring the person who happens to be a reciter of the Quran over other human beings. And before we were talking about the virtue of reciting the Quran, right? That was yesterday. So naturally, if we have a deed which happens to be so virtuous that Allah Azza wa Jal has not given the same reward to any other person to that capacity and to that degree, then naturally this individual deserves some sort of distinction in the world as well, right? And that's why I remind you of that story that I'd mentioned yesterday of Umar ibn al-Khattab when he met his governor Nafi' of Mecca. He had taken this young man Ibn Abza, who was a mawla, and he had made him a governor, a vice, while he is away from Mecca. Why so? Well, again he replied saying that because he happened to be a qari of the Quran. So the virtue of this qari, reciter of the Quran, anyone who happens to be someone who's constantly indulged with the book of Allah Azza wa Jal to recite it, whether that be a woman or a male, are many, one of which is that no matter what situation he may be in, he will always be put forth when it comes to salah time. Okay? So you may have people behind them who happen to be ministers, you may have even prime ministers, you may have sultans, but you have a qari of the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has favored him to the degree that he will always be the imam. He will be the imam, meaning he will be, and the word imam is very closely related to the word amam, which means in front. So he will always be pushed to the front by the people within the location, wherever he may be. This is a virtue that continuously reiterates the fadila, the virtue of this reciter of the Quran. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ, he said, Ya ummul qawm aqra'uhum li kitabillah. The person who should lead people in prayer is the one who happens to be the most able of them to read the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? And Umar ibn al-Khattab, he used to be considerate of this even within his gathering. So if he was sitting in his gathering, now normally people of nobility do not have quote unquote simpletons within their gatherings, right? You have a person, Umar al-Khattab being Amir al-Mu'mineen, the leader of the believers. He's not going to have your average folks. He's not going to also have children running around as well. He's going to have people that are befitting to be sitting with Amir al-Mu'mineen. But sometimes Umar al-Khattab, he used to have young people there as well, right? And those young people that were there within the gathering of Umar al-Khattab, they were such that they were qurra, and that's why he would let them in, and that's why he would favor them in that way. He would let them in for that reason. Why? They happen to be qurra, they happen to be reciters of the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us all from those who recite his book, inshaAllah, and also work towards understanding his book. Allahumma ameen ya Rabb. And this hadith, by the way, is in Bukhari. The qurra of the majlis, of the gathering of Umar al-Khattab, they used to be, and the ones who he would consult as well, they used to be youngsters and they used to be elderly as well, but they were all one quality, and that is that they used to be the qurra. They used to be people who had memorized the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And another angle to look at when we think about the virtue of these people of the Quran is that they are carrying a signpost amidst the signposts of Islam itself. They are carrying the Quran within their hearts. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, ذَلِكَ وَمَنْ يُعَظِّمْ شَعَائِرَ اللَّهِ. Okay, what is a sha'ira? They have different ways of translating it, but I think that the best translation is obviously the one that goes back to the best tafsir of this particular ayah as well. And that is that it refers to everything related to the deen. Okay? We have several different sha'air, several different rituals within the deen. Okay? So, is this ayah in Surah Al-Hajj referring to a specific sha'ira in Hajj itself? No. The ulama, they said one of the ways to understand this ayah is that it's inclusive of all the different sha'air of the deen. ذَلِكَ وَمَنْ يُعَظِّمْ شَعَائِرَ اللَّهِ. If that's the case, then we have to understand it generally, meaning everything related to the deen. Allah is saying, the one who ends up honoring everything related to the deen, then that person is doing so because he has the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala within his heart. Okay? Among the things that are related to the deen, of course, is the Quran. And the person who is the memorizer of the Quran, he hosts the Quran within his heart. So naturally, by honoring the people of the Quran, you will be honoring the Quran itself. Okay? You'll be honoring the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala itself. In addition to that, and it doesn't stop there. But before I even go to the addition, let me just stop at that for a second and let that sink in, right? By honoring the people of Quran, you will be honoring the Quran itself. Okay? This is a very important point to think about. Like, how do we honor the people of the Quran? Have you even thought about the fact that we should be honoring the people of the Quran? In some societies, subhanAllah, the people of the Quran are looked at as the most dishonorable people in some ways, because like they couldn't make it to finance, they couldn't make it to IT, they couldn't make it to anywhere else, and then so they went to the Hafazan, they memorized the Quran, and then the last choice, and then they went to become an imam at the masjid. Subhanallah. A friend of mine, a very intelligent young man at that time, fairly old now, used to be the imam of a masjid in Edmonton, one of the cities I used to reside in at some point in my life. And I remember he told me, he was in the masjid leading salah, and some gentleman came to him and he said, so you couldn't do anything else.
What an insult.
What an insult. MashaAllah, the person was very able. Now he's, I think he's a professor at UFT now of law. But it was just something that he'd memorized the Quran and learned it because it was something that he wanted to do. But the point is, we're more awestruck about his professorship at UFT than we are about his imamah at the masjid. Right? Even now when I said it, everybody goes, okay, he was a professor. That can also happen.
Secularism.
Yeah, no, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what I'm trying to make you realize is we have internalized this feeling that the person of the Quran is not valuable.
Yeah.
It's nothing important. It's not a thing of value. Whereas, out of all of the noble individuals in Mecca, Nafi' ends up appointing a person of the Quran, even though he happens to be, when it comes to societal norms, not a very noble individual.
Yes.
And Umar says that's okay. Because they actually valued the Quran.
Yes.
In his gathering, Umar, the youngsters are there, the elderly are there, but he's making sure that all of them happen to be Qurra. Okay? So the one criteria that he set is Qurra, meaning people who memorize the Quran. Okay? The one criteria that he set is that if they have the Quran committed to their memories, then that would be a good place to start, whether I should let them in or not. Right? So we have to internalize this instead of instead of looking at the people who've memorized the Quran or people who have occupied themselves with the Quran. Until we do this, then we will not be encouraged to do it ourselves. It will always be secondary. Look at how it's become. Before I told you, the young people of our ummah, they used to spend their time first and foremost with the Quran. Now, you study in the morning and Hafazan is always at night.
Yeah.
That's evening. So the more you push the Quran away, the more Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to give you the type of khair that the early generations used to have. Right? Because, I mean, we've internalized this all. We have to admit it. Until that, we don't. That's why personally I homeschool my children. I taught them the Quran first before they learn anything else. Nothing else. You know, people wondered, I mean, are they going to get late? Alhamdulillah, they're on time. Yeah? But the point is, even that, are they going to get late? Well, they will get late. Even if they do, they get late in their secular education perhaps, but why don't you correct the understanding and say, are they going to get late to learn the Quran? Because we've made it that way. Now they finished their school, but they're late to learn the Quran now. Right? And I always tell parents one thing, that there's one, in my opinion, this is a little bit harsh. This is oppression, to be honest. There's one form of oppression you can do to your children that you can never fix afterwards. How so? If you don't enable them to learn to recite the Quran correctly at a younger age, they may never be able to do it when they get older. Whereas if they don't remember the times table, they'll figure it out at 18 even. But when their tongue is not used to reciting the Quran, they can try, but it's not going to be the same as if they were to do it at a young age. Okay? So, it's about how much importance you give to this book, and how much you actually believe in what these things that the Prophet is telling us and Allah is telling us. And He's saying, وَمَن يُعَظِّمْ شَعَائِرَ اللَّهِ, whoever honors the sha'air, whoever honors the rituals of Allah Azza wa Jal, that is from the taqwa of Allah. Think about this, subhanallah. Think about that. The Prophet ﷺ said that from the honoring of Allah, from the honoring of Allah Himself, like from the ways for you to honor Allah Azza wa Jal, is honoring the elderly Muslim, honoring the people of the Quran, the ones who are neither extreme in their understanding of the Quran, nor are they such that they neglect the Quran. Okay? So he said, وَحَامِلِ الْقُرْآنِ, and the person who carries the Quran within his heart. Okay? From the ways to honor Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that you honor the people who have carried the Quran within their hearts. And then the Prophet ﷺ made a clause. He said, غَيْرَ الْغَالِي فِيهِ وَالْجَافِ عَنْهُ, except for the person who's very extreme in their understanding of the Quran, and also the one who happens to be neglectful when it comes to the Quran that they've already gained. Meaning, some people, they memorize the Quran, but they are hamil al-Quran, but they're very neglectful, either in the way they behave, meaning they're not upholding the rights of the Quran, or either in the Quran itself, meaning they've actually neglected it and forgotten a lot of it, even though they're still called hafil, mathalan, right? And the third category, the Prophet ﷺ said, honoring the sultan who happens to be just. Okay? Honoring the sultan who happens to be just. And this is an authentic hadith in Sunan Abi Dawud. So that means that from the ways we can honor Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to honor the people of the Quran. I mean, think about this. Like, even people who are people of great wealth, when it comes to like the charitable wing of things that they may do, you'll find that, okay, when it comes to universities, there's scholarships, that they will endow. When it comes to the hafadha, it's like sadaqah. We're giving charity to people. They're poor people. They don't have much money to memorize the Quran, so we're giving some charity. It's also a mindset. There's a internalized mindset where this is just a secondary thing we do in our lives. This is just one of those secondary things. But when it comes to university education, that is much more important. That is much greater. That is much more valuable. So we're going to endow buildings and scholarships and this and that and funds that are many times much greater in number than the people who memorize the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? It's unfortunate because we don't understand the value of this Quran. We haven't been able to internalize how valuable this book is. These are the words of Allah, my dear sisters.
Yes.
These are the words of Allah. When you're honoring people of the dunya, you're honoring people who are learning and teaching and preaching the fallible words of people. These are the infallible words of God, of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Once you understand that, then the outlook that you have would be no less than ihsan in every aspect of the way you deal with the Quran. I mean, it's bewildering to me, but I don't lose hope because I think that we haven't necessarily done our job to also educate people about the importance of this. And it doesn't stop there. The people of the Quran, they're not just people who are given many virtues, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through His Prophet, He told us that these people of the Quran are actually the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His close ones. That's how the Prophet ﷺ put it. In an authentic hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, Inna lillahi ahlina minan nas. That Allah, it almost says, and I'll translate it literally so you kind of get the gist of it, even though there is a bit of a metaphoric sense in it. It says, Allah has family from among the people as well. Okay? So the Sahabas, they said, and who are these people who happen to be like the family of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So the Prophet ﷺ, he replied and he said, Hum ahlul Qur'ani ahlullahi wa khasatu. These are the people of the Quran, these are the people of Allah. These are the close ones to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These are the ones that are specific and particular to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now remember, whenever we have people who are related to others that are great, okay? Let's put it this way. Let's say that today, as we were having this lesson, we had one of the a daughter from one of the royals of Malaysia join us. It's without any doubt we'll have some sort of special chair or some sort of dignification for the person, isn't that so?
Yes.
And this is not in this house. Okay, that's your prerogative. It's your house. Every person has. Okay, and Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, she said that the Prophet ﷺ used to command us to treat people based on their appropriate statuses. Okay, and we may do this, but do we understand that the Prophet had told us that the people of the Quran are like the family of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So are we willing to go that same sort of degree in order for us to honor the people of the Quran who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has honored with the Quran in their hearts, with the Quran on their tongues, with the Quran in the way they live as well? So these are the people of the Quran. If we are going to honor the people of this world, of the dunya in that way, then obviously when it comes to the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we should be honoring them in much, much greater of ways. Because the Prophet, again, he said, أَمَرَنَا رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم أَن نُنزِلَ النَّاسَ مَنَازِلَهُم. That we end up placing each person in their respective status, as Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha used to say. Right? And the Prophet ﷺ used to honor people of the Quran in this way within his lifetime, and also within their lifetimes, and also after their deaths as well. And we have this in the hadith of Jabir ibn Abdullah in Bukhari as well, that the Prophet ﷺ, he used to take two people. I mean, subhanAllah, this is unbelievable, like to that degree. He would take two people after the battle of Uhud, when they were burying the people who had died in Uhud. And he would bury two people together because they didn't have enough graves for everyone, right? So every two people that would be buried together, the Prophet ﷺ would ask which one of them remembered more Quran, which one of them had memorized more of the Quran. So when they would say, oh, he had memorized out of those two in this particular grave, then he would put him in the front of the grave, because he deserves to be in the front in that way, even after the person has died, even after when the person is about to be buried. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us good deaths. Allahumma ameen ya Rabb. Right? And we have within the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now this is all of that which we discussed earlier on. We're talking about honoring the people of the Quran. But the reality is, we're far from honoring today. Many of us now are harming the people of the Quran, right? The people who happen to be religious folks, not just only religious, but they happen to be, for example, leaders within Muslim communities. They end up getting harmed because they are carrying this book, because people, they say all sorts of nasty things about such people all across the world today, right? And the Prophet ﷺ, he said that man aadha li waliyan faqad aadhantuhu bil harb. The person who harms one of my friends. This is the hadith Qudsi, meaning Allah is speaking. The Prophet told us, Allah said that whoever harms a friend of mine, then I have proclaimed war against this individual. Okay? And if the people of the Quran are not the friends of Allah, then who would be the friends of Allah? Of course, and without a doubt, the people of the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they must be from the friends of Allah. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us His friendship. Allahumma ameen ya Rabb. Now that we know that this is the status of the people of the Quran, okay? We all want to become now the people of the Quran, isn't it? So let's try to learn a little bit about what are some of the qualities of the learners and also the teachers of the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.